An American scientist, Carl Anderson, is sitting at his computer preparing his report that the Seo Bok project cannot be continued because many processes have been disturbed and its legitimacy is in question. The scientist is distracted from his work by a bird rambling in its cage, and approaching it, the man hears a strange sound outside the window. Opening the curtains, he sees a drone pointing its camera at him. A few seconds later, there is an explosion. In his apartment, ex-intelligence man Ki-heon is suffering from a wild headache. The man tries to find the rest of the painkillers on his desk, but nothing comes out. He has long since used up everything he had in reserve. One of the government leaders contacts the doctor in the lab and tells him what happened to Anderson. It becomes clear that the project must urgently be moved elsewhere because someone else has become aware of it. Ki-heon goes to the hospital to see his buddy, who secretly gives the buddy a prescription painkiller, once again asking him not to show up unannounced. The man goes off to the waterfront, where he appears to be completely alone, and takes the medicine, inhaling it through a plastic cup. When relief sets in, the guy falls asleep and is awakened by a knock on his window. Several men introduce themselves as employees of a certain office and very insistently ask Ki-heon to go with them, without answering unnecessary questions. The retired intelligence agent is brought to a ship with a secret laboratory hidden inside. Dr. Lin, the head of the lab, tells Ki-heon about some experiments of hers, but he understands nothing until he is shown a guy living in a kind of seaside-inspired flask. The guy is no different from an ordinary person, at least at first glance. He sits on the shore, looking out over the water, and a small white bird perches on his shoulder. The doctor tells Ki-heon that this is the first clone created in their laboratory from a young driver using stem cells, but he can hardly be called human now. The lab calls him Seo Bok, after the name of the project itself. Seo Bok is immortal in the common human sense. It can be destroyed by any physical means, but it does not age and its life does not come to an end naturally. In addition, the uniqueness of the clone is that its stem cells can cure absolutely any disease and can be harvested forever. Ki-heon is assigned to protect the guy because after the American scientist's death, the guy is the first target of those who want to disrupt the experiment and get rid of all evidence of the discovery. To prove to the bodyguard the veracity of his words, Dr. Lin says something quietly to his ward, and he demonstrates his abilities. The stones around the guy begin to collect, forming something like a whirlpool. Ki-heon wakes up in a hospital room after he has had another attack. It turns out that the scout has long suffered from a severe tumor in his brain, and he has a few months to live. The doctor promises the bodyguard that if he pulls it off, they can use Seo Bok's bone marrow to cure his tumor. Ki-heon is also summoned to speak with the founder of the lab, who has direct ties to the government. He too asks the scout to accompany the sample to a secret bunker, in exchange for them taking him into the program and trying to cure his tumor. Seo Bok is given a white medical suit and a respirator. Then the guy and his bodyguard are loaded into a large truck equipped with medical equipment and sent to the designated location, accompanied by several vehicles. Ki-heon tries to get to know the young man, but he is still wary of him and takes his hand off. The bodyguard notices that they are driving in the wrong direction and contacts the escort car, but from their response the man immediately realizes that something is wrong. The escorts also guess that they have failed to lie and tell their supervisor that the bodyguard has figured out their deception. The founder of the laboratory, who commands the diversion, orders them not to make a fuss and to continue to mislead the bodyguard until his American comrades intercept the sample. But things don't go according to plan for either side. A firefight breaks out on the road, and someone destroys all of the escort vehicles. The truck flies off the road and comes to a stop. With his gun ready and his sample covered, Ki-heon waits for someone to show up to let him know what's going on, but a smoke grenade ends up flying into the back of their truck. Ki-heon regains consciousness sitting against the wall with his hands cuffed together. Seo Bok continues to sit in his seat and can't explain anything, as this is his first time out of the lab and he hasn't yet understood what strangers are doing. A soldier in an American uniform enters the back of the car and prepares to give the clone guy an injection, but the man, realizing he's unlikely to be helped, first warns him and then uses his powers to make the American leave him alone. In the meantime, Ki-heon manages to unlock the handcuffs and sneak behind the wheel of the truck. By the time the other American soldiers realize that something has happened to their buddy, the car starts up and drives out of an unfamiliar hangar through a brick wall. Not yet realizing who the traitor is, Ki-heon calls his old friend, the founder of the lab, and tells him what has happened. He calmly gives his location and asks for further instructions. The truck won't start and Ki-heon decides to walk, but Seo Bok refuses to follow his bodyguard until he tells him why someone is after them and why he can trust him. The scout has no choice but to confess that he expects to be cured. The young men's journey takes them through the town market. Finding himself in a crowded place for the first time, Seo Bok looks at the store windows in grocery stores with amazement, which draws even more attention to himself and his strange costume. Ki-heon even has to spend his own money to change his ward into normal clothes, which are to the boy's taste. Ki-heon takes the boy to a secret base where they manage to get some weapons and take a little break. The bodyguard feeds the boy some noodles, which he likes so much that he happily asks for more. During dinner, the guard tries to get him to talk and find out what he liked to do in the lab, but it turns out that apart from experiments and occasional contact with Dr. Lin, we thought was his mother, the guy has never encountered anything else. On the monitor screen, Min Ki-heon sees that people from the lab's founder have come to see them, and the bodyguard quietly opens the door for them, expecting help. But it almost immediately becomes clear that they came with not so good intentions and their objective is to make the specimen disappear. The man covers the guy by himself, also making projectiles flying at them bounce off an invisible shield, and then he beats off bad guys. Min takes the phone from one of the mercenaries and calls their boss, who organized this ambush to know what's going on, and when the betrayal comes out, refuses to follow the order with bad words. Then the guard contacts the lab and the doctor asks him to bring the guy to them so they can protect him, but Ki-heon now doubts everyone and doesn't know what he should do next. Back there in the lab, in a wheelchair, sits an infirm old man who has no intention of losing his creation. He is the one who sponsored the creation of the clone in order to improve and prolong his life. Seo Bok refuses to go to the lab and asks his bodyguard to take him elsewhere. He shows a wad of money in his pocket and warns that he will go alone if his buddy refuses to help him. Ki-heon agrees to take him to the right place, even though he doesn't like it, but after a short time he regrets it deeply as he is feeling ill and his mouth is bleeding. The head of the lab contacts her main sponsor via video link and he says that he knows about his collusion with the US government and the plan to destroy the sample. Conflict erupts between the men, and the old man cuts the conversation short. The young men stop at a gas station to fill up with gas, and while Ki-heon is distracted, the young man has a scuffle with the local guys. The bodyguard has to explain to the boy that he shouldn't use his powers in normal life. Ki-heon has to hide his car on the coast as a lot of police gather on the way to the lab. The young man resents him for taking him to the doctors after all, but the guard is seriously afraid that without the daily injections the specimen needs, he will simply die. Sitting by the sea at night, the men talk a lot about life and death and the human condition in this world in general, and Ki-heon remembers how years ago he already had an unpleasant encounter with the founder of the lab, who easily got rid of one of his subordinates. In the end, the bodyguard does bring the guy to the temple he was eager to go to. The urns containing the ashes of his real parents are kept there. After that, the sample agrees to go to the lab, even though he realizes what's waiting for him there. But on the way, Min Ki-heon's car is cut off, and unknown people pick him and his ward up and bring them to the lab they were already going to. Seo Bok is hooked up to a machine that begins pumping his bone marrow, and lying on a chair he looks longingly at the brightly colored clothes he spent some of his best days in. The boy remembers his conversation with Dr. Lin and how he first wondered what he might have become if he had been a normal person. Having come to his senses, Ki-heon goes to the lab and sees the whole procedure. He asks the doctor about the guy being put under an IV, and he says with gusto that he will spend the rest of his life producing bone marrow for the powers that be. But the bodyguard decides to free the young man to whom he has become attached, and they can take the place of those who have decided his fate for so long. A real battle ensues in the lab, during which it is revealed that Dr. Lin was destroyed by her own colleagues because she too tried to stop the experiments on Seo Bok. This angers the guy so much that he wrecks the ship, squeezing the old man creator's wheelchair into a small lump of metal, along with its owner. But the pursuit doesn't end there, as there are already hundreds of armed military men waiting outside, commanded by the head of the lab, who intends to get rid of the guy to keep the development from being released to the world at the behest of his American friends. Not without difficulty, but Seo Bok's army is also easily dealt with by his abilities. He and Ki-heon are left alone, on a broken and fallen embankment. The bodyguard asks the guy to run away and save his life, but Seo Bok realizes that the lab was his only home and he has nowhere to go, and the hunt for him will never end. He asks his friend to put him out of his misery and accept the fact that he cannot cure his tumor. Realizing how the young man feels, Ki-heon pulls the trigger. The bodyguard buries his buddy's body on the beach by the water itself, where they recently sat talking about life. As the man leaves, a white bird, like the one that sat on Seo Bok's shoulder, sits on the tombstone made of stones.